Peace, family. It's your boy Zay-P, Zay-P the I am. I am that I am, as you are that you are, for we are all that we are. I hope these messages benefit you. If they do, be sure to please like, subscribe, follow wherever this may be posted on social media. Let's get the word out, because we are doing the work of ascending the masses, of waking up and ascending the masses. And whether we're talking about ascending dimensionality, going from 3D to 5D, whether you're talking about rising up as far as people's standards in living and people's standards in their own personal life, whether we're talking about rising vibrations, whether we are talking about just changing the status quo to be more in line and aligned with our higher selves, our authentic selves, that internal wellspring of love that we are. So, if any of that is you, I appreciate y'all joining me here. Definitely want to ask you, like, subscribe, follow, all that good stuff, so we can continue to share these messages and continue to help awaken the masses. So for today, I felt the need to come through, drop a message about ego. My guides came through the other day, and during the last couple of meditations, this theme of the ego kept rising. This ego, particularly this spiritual ego, this ego within the spiritual communities. And not just spiritual communities, you see this in religion communities, you see these in all sorts of theosophical communities, where people will, where a spiritual kind of ego will develop. People will start to think themselves morally superior, higher standing morally or ethically, and people will begin to cast judgments on others as though other people who may not be on those particular same levels or on that particular path is off course and is doomed to suffer hell and all this other nonsense. Fact of the matter is, that couldn't be further from the truth. It's all BS. Everybody has their own unique individual path to walk. Problem with our culture today is that so many of us are forced to conform and try to fit in and walk all of these other paths which have been established by others, which were established by unique individuals, and others have been kind of forced in that same direction. The other aspect of ego that comes in when we come to these spiritual communities and religious communities and theosophical communities is the idea that, especially around light workers, quote unquote, this spiritual bypassing idea. And spiritual bypassing is a whole nother theme and conversation to have, but we're going to stay on point with the ego. This whole spiritual bypassing idea that we are here to kill our ego, to shun, to deny, to destroy our ego, that we are in some sort of conflict or some sort of war with the ego, and we have to kind of kill it off in order for our higher selves to come out and be expressed, in order for us to embody our light. This is a huge fallacy. I'm gonna tell you why. First of all, the ego is part of the self. To kill the ego is to kill an aspect of the self. But what does that mean? That means being at war with the self, being in conflict with the self. Now, whatever your particular belief is on God, on source, on universal oneness, any of these other labels or ideas, one of the commonalities of this principle, of this energy, of this force, is that it is encompassing the all. It is everything. Even if you look at the Bible, it says, in reference to God, the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning, the end, etc. It is all things. It is not necessarily, I am the light, therefore I am not the darkness. No, it is the light and it is the darkness. Because without one, there can be no other, right? So your light and your dark both have to be in balance in order for creation to even exist. So the idea that you need to kill your ego is a huge fallacy. The problem with the ego that so many people have is that we tend to confuse ourselves for the ego. We tend to think of our ego as the grandest version of ourselves, at least when we're in our unawakened states, when we're not being mindful, when we're not acknowledging or knowing that there is more to life than just us. So when we tend to start to confuse and think of ourselves as the ego, which is really merely just an aspect of the smaller self and not actually our grander self, but when we tend to confuse and think this aspect of the solar self is our greatest, grandest version, we tend to be limited and constrained by the imaginations of man, by the limited scope and perspective of man. The fact of the matter is that the ego was never meant to be in control. Your ego is to be a tool. Think of it like this. This world that we resonate in, that we reside in, this 3D physical plane, it is just like going online, right? They say the world that we live in is the Matrix. I even did a video about that recently. That it is just like going online. Once you leave the spirit realm and you kind of plug into the 3D Matrix. The ego in and of itself is little more than your username. Now, I'm assuming a lot of people can relate to this metaphor because we live in a digital age and people have to log in and log out of accounts all the time. You look at my YouTube or my Facebook channel, Zay-P the I am. That is my username for that particular profile. That is me when I'm embodying my channeled state, when I'm connecting with my divine guides, and I'm connecting with you to share whatever particular messages need to come forth. So Zay-P the I am is just one aspect, but it's like a connection. It's the user interface for me to connect to this platform that I can connect to everybody who connects to Zay-P the I am. Aside from that, there are other aspects of myself. There's Zay the father. There's Zay the professional. There's Eliezer the professional, right? Or Eliezer the student. There is all these other aspects which are also part of me. Now, on this particular platform, when I log in here, you get Zay-P the I am. You get me in my channeled connected state. But you may not see necessarily Eliezer the student. You may not see Daddy, Zay, Daddy. You're not going to see that yet. My child will see that. You may not see Zay in whatever other capacity, domestic mode. You might not see these things, but they do exist. I go out into the streets, people know me as Big Zay, right? Like, yo, what up, Big Zay, what's good, right? So in that particular state or in that specific environment, you conform and you embody another aspect of the self. But all of these aspects of the self are not to be splintered off and necessarily killed. It's all you. The idea you want to do is integrate it all. You want to bring it all together into one, into finding balance of the self. You're balancing your negative and positive polarities. And so the thing that I find perplexing and really disturbing about spiritual communities is that for so many teachers and guides and healers and people of that nature who supposedly do the light work stuff, who are supposedly out here doing the work of connecting with and awakening others, there's a lot of talk about killing off these vital aspects of yourself. People are not wanting to do shadow work so much, but people are very quick to say we have to kill off the ego. There is no killing off your ego. Your ego is a definite aspect of your human, smaller self. It is how you relate to the world. It is how you connect to the world. It is the mask you put on your face to present in whatever specific environments here on this physical plane. If you do not have an ego, your soul's essence does not have a way to connect and come into this plane. Sure, it can come down in a particular essence form. It can try to be malleable, take shapes to try to relate to us, but without its own individual avatar, there's no way for it to reside here on this plane. So when you have a specific avatar, your avatar has its own name, it has its own personality, it has its own quirks and kinks and preferences. These are all human aspects. So there's no real way to kill your ego. A lot of people say they have killed their ego. What's happening is they're suppressing their ego. They're bypassing the fact that they still have an ego, or they may have attached to a new ego, to maybe the ego of their spiritual self. Oh, I am a guru, I do this, I do that, and that is all I am. I am just one with the universe and the ethers. Okay, that's nice, but outside of that, is that aspect who you're embodying when you're at home and with your family and you have to take out the trash, or you have to do regular homebody stuff? Like, other aspects will come through of the self, aspects that you may not show when you're in your spiritual guru self. So when these people are saying, oh, kill off the ego, what's happening is that they're suppressing their ego, they're denying their ego, but the ego is still alive. There's no way to kind of kill off how you connect to reality. There's just no way to do that. But what there is balance. You can find the balance in your ego. You can kind of balance out any negative aspects of the ego. You can look and say, okay, this ego, I can be a little whatever, superficial or whatever. You can work on these aspects. But the point is, the idea to just kill off your ego and act like it is not there does not serve anybody. It does a disservice to you, because the ego is supposed to be a tool. The idea is to get the ego to work for the higher self, bringing the higher self and the lower self aligned with each other, right? So you want to enroll the ego into working with and for the higher self. As you start to do things from the ego perspective, as far as recognizing that the ego's wants and desires are really the same things that the higher self wants and desires, well then, once those two can come aligned, now you have a more cleaned up, effective tool for navigating this reality. But when you're confused and you're actually thinking of yourself as just this limited, small scope aspect of the grander whole, well then, that's like me saying, okay, I'm going to confuse myself for, quote unquote, Zay-P, the I am. I'm going to confuse my actual whole being and just think that I'm only Zay-P, the I am. And I'm going to try to walk around my world with that specific mask on 24/7. Eventually that mask will have to come off. Eventually I'll have to go home and clean up. Eventually I'll have to do some other things where the mask of Zay-P, the I am, will not hold up, you know. So in those cases, then you realize, oh, you are more than just the ego. Oh, there are other aspects to you beyond just this one particular profile, this one particular user interface, this one particular screen name. There's more to you, right? You may be somebody who have multiple screen names and multiple accounts because you're doing various different things, right? I have Zay-P, the I am profile here, but I also have other accounts and profiles for other things that I'm working on, right? This is all about finding balance for your ego and not necessarily being so concerned about having to kill it off, but understanding how to enroll it and use it as a tool for your highest good. It is just like shadow work. A lot of our shadows people want to run from, want to hide from, but you can never really run from yourself. Wherever you run, you tend to bring those same problems with you because there's part of your shadow. You know, a lot of the stuff with the ego are coming from our shadow. And as we try to destroy our ego, we're trying to destroy our shadow. We can never really destroy an aspect of ourselves. Not until we actually look at it, we shed light onto the shadow, and we can watch the shadow start to dissipate. But at the same time, we can recognize that other shadows will appear, because that is the thing about lights and shadows, right? You point a light on one specific area of shadow, and yet behind that light, a new shadow will pop up. Because the light is pointed in another direction, shadows appear, light and shadows. You can't eliminate one without the other. Without the light, without the shadow, the light has no purpose. There's no identity. There's no specific set point of what is light, what is this light doing. It just is what is. Everything is just bright for no reason. You know? So you need shadow in order to define the light, in order to see, oh, this is shadow, this is light. This is where my positive polarity is, this is where my negative polarity is. And those set points change with the ebb and flow of life. So I just wanted to drop that as a reminder to keep that in mind when you're doing the spiritual work and you're meeting up people, or you're listening to things and you're taking in content. Make sure you're discerning as to the messages and the teachings that's being communicated to you, because not all things are meant to resonate with you. Not all people are meant to be running around trying to kill their shadows. I think a majority of society is not really ready to be trying to get to that place where they can just say, oh, all my shadows are gone, or my ego is dead, because that's a fallacy in thought.